Emily stepped out of the cafe with tired shoulders and the faint smell of roasted coffee still clinging to her clothes. It had been a long day, morning rushes, spilled drinks, impatient customers, yet the evening air felt calm. She locked the cafe door, ready to drive home, when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Sarah. Double quotes, "Hey, can you drop Daniel home? His car broke down again." "He's near your cafe." Emily paused. She knew Daniel well enough to recognize his polite smile at family dinners. The way he stayed quiet in group settings, always observing instead of trying to stand out. He was respectful, humble, and soft-spoken, but they had never talked deeply. Their interactions were usually short. Friendly hellos at holiday gatherings or casual jokes across the table when Sarah invited her over. Being alone with him felt unfamiliar, yet not uncomfortable, just unexpected. She typed back a quick "sure" and walked toward her car. She expected Daniel to be on his phone or pacing, frustrated about the situation, but instead he stood calmly near a street lamp, hands in his jacket pockets, head tilted back as he watched the sky. The glow of the lamp cast a soft light across his face, making him look thoughtful rather than stranded. When he noticed her, he smiled in a way that seemed grateful, not embarrassed. "Thanks for this. I really didn't want to call a tow truck at this hour," he said as he sat in the passenger seat. Emily shrugged like it was no big deal, though she could feel a quiet awareness between them, not tension, just unfamiliar closeness. "No problem," she replied, fastening her seatbelt as she pulled onto the road. They exchanged small talk, the kind that feels like warming up to something deeper. He asked about her shift. She asked what happened to his car. He laughed softly about how it just decided life was too hard today. His voice was calm but tired, like the joke was only covering a heavier truth. The city lights passed by them, and eventually their conversation faded into silence. Emily didn't mind silence. She liked when things didn't have to be forced. But there was something different about this silence. Daniel kept staring out the window, not lost in traffic or scenery, but in thoughts he wasn't saying out loud. His foot tapped softly against the car mat. His fingers kept rubbing his thumb like he was rehearsing words. Emily stole a glance. His expression wasn't upset, just distant, like someone carrying a secret that was wearing him down before she could break the silence. Her phone buzzed with another message from Sarah. "Hey, Daniel's been going through a lot. Don't push him, just be kind." Emily's eyebrows lowered slightly. Going through a lot. Daniel didn't look like someone in crisis. He looked like someone holding himself together quietly. She tucked the phone away and focused on the road. "You okay?" she asked gently. Daniel blinked as if pulled out of a maze in his mind. "Yeah, just tired. Long day. Long week." He let out a small breath, almost a sigh. "Long year." Honestly, Emily wanted to ask more. What happened? "Why didn't you tell Sarah? Why does it look like you're carrying everything alone?" But she didn't push. Sometimes people talk when they're ready. Instead, she said something lighter. "At least the night is peaceful." That got a small smile from him. Not a big one, but enough to soften the distance. They stopped at a red light near the river. The sky reflected on the water, street lights shimmering on the surface. Emily noticed Daniel watching the scene, his shoulders relaxing. For a moment, they didn't need words. Then he said quietly, as if thinking aloud, "It's strange how you can be surrounded by people but still feel alone." The light turned green, and Emily drove forward without responding right away. She understood that feeling more than she expected to. "You're not alone," she said softly. "Not really." He looked at her, surprised not because of the words, but because someone finally said them. The road stretched ahead, lined with houses and trees that flickered like silhouettes in the car headlights. They were halfway to his neighborhood when Daniel shifted in his seat. "Do you mind taking the long route?" he asked suddenly. Emily didn't question why. She just nodded and turned toward the river road instead of the direct street leading to his house. The sun had already set, but the city's glow lit up the sky. The car felt like its own world, quiet, safe, removed from everything outside. Daniel's shoulders seemed to ease. Kate, like he finally had space to breathe. His voice was almost a whisper when he spoke again. "Thanks for picking me up. I know you didn't have to." Emily smiled. "Your family? Well, kind of. And I don't mind." That made him laugh softly. A real laugh this time, not tired, not forced. For a moment, he looked lighter, as if carrying a weight he wasn't ready to name but needed someone beside him while he held it. He looked out the window again, but this time not to escape, more like he was gathering courage. Emily had no idea that this simple car ride, which began as a small favor, was about to open doors to conversations that neither of them expected. She only knew something was shifting. Slowly and quietly, between two people who had never spent time alone but suddenly found themselves sharing a moment that felt strangely meaningful. The night didn't feel like just a ride home anymore. It felt like the beginning of a story they hadn't realized they were part of. Emily took the long route without asking questions, turning the car toward the riverside road where tall trees lined the pavement and soft city lights reflected on the water. The longer path was quiet, almost empty at this hour, and the hum of the engine filled the silence. Daniel sat with one arm resting near the window, eyes following the reflections on the river as if they carried answers he needed. He finally spoke, not looking at her. "I quit my job today." Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Daniel was known for being responsible, steady, always doing what everyone expected. Walking away from a stable job didn't sound like something he would do lightly. "You quit," she repeated, making sure she heard correctly. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I walked into the office, packed my things, and told them I was done." There was no anger in his voice, more exhaustion than anything else. He rubbed the side of his forehead as if replaying the moment. Emily glanced at him. "Why? You worked so hard to get that job. Was something wrong there?" Daniel sighed, and for a moment, he didn't answer. He looked at the passing trees like he needed them to explain things for him. "It just stopped feeling like my life," he said quietly. "Every morning I woke up with this heavy feeling, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't." Emily didn't interrupt. She kept driving, letting him speak at his own pace. "It wasn't about the money," he continued, "or the position. I just felt like I was stuck in a job that looked good on paper but didn't make sense to my heart. And I didn't want to admit it to anyone because everyone thought I was doing great." Emily understood that feeling more than she expected. She worked at the cafe because it was steady, familiar, safe, not because it matched her dreams. Still, she never said that out loud to anyone either. "Sometimes leaving is harder than staying," she said softly. "It takes strength to start over." Daniel looked at her as if he hadn't expected understanding. "So you don't think I'm being irresponsible?" "No," she said gently. "I think you're being honest with yourself. Most people don't have the courage to do that." His eyes softened with relief, like someone finally saw the part of him he kept hidden. The car rolled past a row of streetlights, each one lighting the interior for a split second before leaving them in darkness again. The rhythm felt calming. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat, facing her more directly. "Everyone expects me to have a plan," he said. "My parents are proud of me because I look successful. My friends think I'm stable. But no one asks if I'm actually happy." Emily took a quiet breath. "Are you?" Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "Not really." There was no dramatic pause. Just a simple truth spoken with tired honesty. Emily let silence settle again. But this silence felt warmer than before, like a space where he was allowed to feel without judgment. After a moment, Daniel adjusted his seatbelt, exhaling deeply. "Sarah told me I should talk to someone. She just didn't expect it to be you." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Do you wish she picked someone else?" He smiled faintly. "No, I think I needed someone who listens without trying to fix everything." "You do that?" She didn't respond, but the compliment stayed with her. She wasn't usually the person people came to with emotional confessions, yet right now, Daniel seemed comfortable in her presence in a way she hadn't seen before. They passed a quiet neighborhood where houses sat far apart, porch lights glowing like small beacons. Daniel continued speaking, his voice slower, steadier. I felt trapped, he said. Not because of work, but because I kept living based on what other people expected. And every day I felt more disconnected from who I was supposed to be. Emily nodded. And quitting felt like taking your life back. Daniel looked out the window again. More like admitting something to myself. I kept saying I'd leave when the time was right, but the truth is, there's no perfect time to walk away from something everyone approves of. Emily understood. Life rarely waits for the perfect moment. He leaned his head back against the seat. I'm not proud of quitting. I just knew I couldn't keep lying. Emily wanted to ask more what's next. What do you want now? But she sensed he was holding on to something he hadn't said yet. She focused on the road, letting her voice stay soft. Thank you for telling me. Emily parked outside Daniel's apartment building, but neither of them reached for the door. The engine hummed softly and streetlights cast long shadows across the quiet road. It felt like time slowed down, as if the conversation still had something important left unfinished. Daniel sat still, staring at the building like he wasn't ready to return to the life waiting behind that door. He finally spoke. There's something I didn't tell you earlier. Emily stayed silent, but attentive, hands resting on the steering wheel, her body turned slightly toward him. She sensed he was carrying something heavier than a career change or exhaustion. Daniel breathed slowly, like he was trying to steady his voice. I didn't quit because of stress, or because I hated the job. He ran his hand through his hair, eyes lowered. I quit because they offered me a promotion. Emily blinked. A promotion? That should be a good thing. He gave a small, sad smile. It should be. Better pay, more responsibility, new title. Everything people want. He paused. But it required moving out of state. They wanted me to leave next month. Emily felt a shift in her chest. She had assumed quitting was about frustration, burnout, or pressure. She hadn't imagined he walked away from a future everyone else would have celebrated. Why didn't you take it? She asked softly. Daniel leaned back against the headrest, eyes closing for a moment. Because I didn't want to leave Portland. He opened his eyes again, turning toward her. But it wasn't about the city. Emily's heartbeat slowed. Then what was it about? Daniel hesitated, choosing silence over rushing the words. The quiet inside the car grew heavy, not awkward, but intimate, like a moment that needed care. He finally said, There's someone here, someone I care about, and I didn't want to pretend I could just walk away and forget. The air felt warmer, almost tense. Emily's thoughts raced. She didn't know who he meant, but something about the way he said someone made her feel unusually aware of him sitting beside her. She tried to keep her voice steady. Does this person know how you feel? Daniel looked down at his hands. No, I kept it to myself. I thought it would fade if I ignored it, but it only made everything worse. Emily swallowed, keeping her expression neutral even though her heart felt strangely unbalanced. She didn't want to assume anything, but she couldn't ignore the possibility that he might be talking about her. Still, she stayed quiet, letting him speak. Daniel looked out the window again. I kept telling myself it was just a crush, something that would go away if I focused on work. He shook his head, but it didn't. It only made me feel more lost there. Emily gently rested her elbow on the door, watching him. So leaving your job was about choosing honesty with yourself. He nodded. I didn't want to build a life that took me farther from what mattered. Emily felt her chest tighten. This wasn't a dramatic confession, yet it carried weight. Daniel wasn't someone who made emotional decisions on impulse. If he quit his job because of feelings, those feelings were deep. She wanted to ask, who is it? Is it someone I know? Is it me? But part of her feared the answer, whether it confirmed her hope or crushed it. Daniel continued, voice softer. I didn't tell my family the real reason. They'd overthink it or try to control it. Sarah would tease me forever. He smiled slightly. I guess this is the first time I'm actually admitting it out loud. Emily nodded slowly. Thank you for trusting me. He met her eyes then. And there was something vulnerable, their hope, mixed with fear. "I didn't expect to talk about this tonight," he said. "But when you picked me up, it felt easier to talk than to keep holding everything in." Emily felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. She didn't feel like a casual listener anymore. She felt like someone chosen, someone needed in a quiet way. Daniel shifted slightly, his voice lower now. "I know this might sound dramatic, but leaving that job felt like choosing a different kind of future. A future that feels real." Emily leaned her head back against the seat, absorbing his words. The car felt like a private space shielded from the world outside. A space where truths could be spoken without consequences. "What do you want now?" she finally asked. Daniel smiled, but it was small and honest. "I don't know yet. I just know I want to start living on purpose, not just because I followed a path someone else drew for me." Emily nodded. "That's a powerful first step." He exhaled softly. Like her understanding gave him space to breathe. Silence fell again. But this silence was different from the earlier ones. It was full of meaning, heavy with something unspoken. Daniel reached for the door, almost ready to leave. But he stopped with his hand on the latch, turning back to her one more time. "Emily, the main reason I stayed is something I'm still scared to say. Because if I say it, it might change everything." She felt her pulse quicken. "Not every change is a bad thing," she said carefully. He looked at her like he wanted to believe that, but instead of confessing, he pulled his hand back from the door and leaned slightly closer, not physically enough to cross a line, but emotionally enough to say something without words. "I'll tell you when I'm sure you're ready to hear it," he whispered. Emily nodded slowly, accepting the moment even though curiosity pressed against her chest. Daniel reached for the door again. This time, opening it before he stepped out, he looked back with a softer smile. "Thank you for tonight. I needed it more than you know." Emily smiled gently. "Anytime." He closed the door carefully, not slamming it, as if respecting the weight of the moment they shared. She watched him walk toward his building, his steps slower than usual, like he was still thinking that as she drove away. The night felt different, not like an ending, but like a chapter that had just opened. And even though nothing was said directly, something unspoken lingered between them, quiet, warm, and full of possibility. Emily drove slowly away from Daniel's apartment, her hands still gripping the steering wheel, her mind replaying every word he had said. The streetlights passed by in a rhythmic blur, but the rhythm didn't calm her. Every detail, the tone of his voice, the pause before his words, the small, hesitant smiles stayed in her mind. This ride had become more than a favor. It had become a window into someone's heart, fragile and unguarded. She hadn't expected to hear any of it. She had thought this drive would be small talk, polite conversation, maybe a little awkward silence. But instead, it was honesty, quiet yet heavy, the kind of honesty that stayed with you long after the words were spoken. Daniel hadn't left yet, though. He had opened the door, paused, and turned back. His hand rested lightly on the car door, and his eyes met hers. There was something in them she hadn't seen before, something raw, unmasked, almost trembling under the calm exterior. "Emily," he began, his voice low, careful, almost hesitant. She leaned slightly closer, sensing the weight in the silence that followed. "I didn't ask for the long route just to have more time to talk about my job. I asked because I wanted more time with you." The words landed gently, but they felt like a spark in the still night. Emily's chest tightened, and her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected him to say something so personal, so quietly brave. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, steady, and real. She didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced. Every logical thought, he's Sarah's brother. He might be feeling something he shouldn't. I can't assume. Clashed with the fluttering in her chest. She felt warm, a little dizzy, but also grounded by the honesty of the moment. Daniel waited, his gaze steady, patient. "You don't have to say anything now," he said softly. "I just wanted you to know. Because pretending I don't feel this way feels worse than risking saying it." Emily's lips curved into a small, careful smile. She felt an unexpected comfort in his words, a connection forming in the space between them. This wasn't a confession made for drama or attention. It was calm, mature, full of the kind of honesty that comes when someone trusts you completely. "Daniel," she whispered, almost to herself, "I'm glad you told me. You didn't have to, and yet you did. That takes courage." His eyes softened, relief flickering there. "I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't want this to be awkward or complicated, but I also couldn't ignore it anymore." Emily nodded slowly. She wanted to say more. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she felt something too, but she held back, letting the moment breathe. There was no rush. There didn't need to be. For once, time seemed willing to slow down for them. Daniel exhaled quietly, like he had released something he had been holding on to for years. He leaned back slightly, not closing the car door yet. "I know I shouldn't say all of this in one night, but maybe we can figure it out slowly, together." Emily's heart thumped in her chest. There was warmth in the way he spoke, in the way he wasn't demanding anything, just sharing. "I'd like that," she said softly, her voice steady but full of emotion. For a moment, they just sat there, letting the silence of the night fill the space between them. It wasn't empty. It was comforting, full of unspoken possibilities, full of hope. Emily realized she had never felt so calm and alive in the same instant. Finally, Daniel stepped out of the car, his movements careful, almost deliberate. He closed the door softly, not locking it yet, as if respecting the pause they had shared. "So, can I ask for another ride tomorrow?" he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Playful but hesitant. Emily laughed quietly, a sound that felt natural and unforced, the tension of the evening giving way to warmth. "I think I'd like that," she replied. The city around them remained calm, the streets empty, the soft hum of distant cars blending into the background. Emily drove away slowly, stealing one last glance at Daniel walking toward his building. He looked back once, catching her eyes, and smiled again. This smile carried gratitude, relief, and something softer, something tender that lingered in the space between them as she drove. Emily reflected on the evening. It had started as a small favor, a simple ride home, but it had turned into a quiet revelation, an opening of hearts that neither of them had expected. There was no rush, no dramatic confessions that would change everything instantly. There was just honesty, shared courage, and a promise of possibilities. She thought about how rare it was to feel understood without judgment, to feel that someone could see you in a way no one else did. That feeling stayed with her as the city lights faded behind her and the quiet roads stretched ahead. She felt lighter, freer, like the honesty had unburdened both of them. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "Pretending I don't feel this way feels worse than risking saying it." She understood completely. There was power in honesty, even when it was quiet, even when it was tentative. Sometimes the smallest truths could shift everything in the gentlest, most profound way. By the time Emily reached her own apartment, the night felt different. The air smelled fresher, calmer, filled with possibility. She parked, sat for a moment, and let herself breathe. Something had begun tonight, something subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't a rush of passion or instant romance. It was trust, connection, and the start of something real. She thought about Daniel walking up the stairs, the careful, quiet way he had shared his feelings, the soft courage in his eyes. She realized she didn't need answers immediately. She didn't need the future planned out or explained. What mattered was this moment, this honesty, this calm reveal, this feeling that hearts could speak without pressure. Emily smiled to herself, quietly happy. The ride had been more than she expected. It had been a gift of trust, the beginning that didn't scream for attention but whispered for patience and understanding. She knew tomorrow would bring new moments, new conversations, and maybe more revelations. But tonight was enough. Tonight was a calm, gentle start. A moment suspended in time that neither of them would forget. As she turned off her car and stepped into her apartment, she felt an unusual warmth lingering in her chest. She knew this was only the beginning, A quiet chapter that would unfold slowly, beautifully, and with honesty. And somehow that felt perfect.